Hi everyone, my name is Anne McElhenney.
And I'm Phelim McAleer.
And it's January 2022 and it's week 97, almost 2 years since 2 weeks to flatten the curve lockdown. In Ireland,
yes,
in Ireland we have just been told that we're free. Free at last, thank God Almighty, we're free at last.
We're always free. You know.
Well, yeah, well, I thought that, but with recent pronouncements, I've realised that actually, you know, the Taoiseach in Ireland, the Prime Minister, has just freed people and told them that they were really well behaved. He was very impressed with their behaviour.
That's right.
Like the teacher that he is.
Yes.
So, so we're free now.
All
so basically,
COVID restrictions have been removed from Ireland.
Yes.
So now pubs will no longer close at 8 p.m. Nightclubs will reopen. You won't have to wear masks.
Concert venues will be
100%.
100%. They were at 50%.
It's amazing. This is an amazing virus. It just went from complete lockdowns, right? Overnight to everything. It's got nothing to do with politics at all. But anyway, we need to be very careful because when we talk about the COVID virus,
so basically, yeah, we got a complaint, but from thank you very much for pointing this out. We have been throwing in an extra consonant. Do you know that kind of way that you can do that? We were saying the Omicron, and it's not Omicron. It is Omicron. But actually, you know what? We needn't to be worried about it anymore because I think Omicron is gone now.
Omicron's gone. It's gone. But we also need to be very careful talking about anything to do with the COVID, the Chinese,
CCP virus.
The virus that has absolutely got nothing to do with CCP because YouTube have banned a couple of our episodes. Now, we only got one of them back because Fox News made a fuss and we had to appeal the other one. But we were at the situation where we were looking at 2 strikes, and if you had 3 strikes, they remove all your YouTube channel. So whatever the World Health Organization says about Omicron, your granny's con, we totally agree with it, don't we, Anne?
All those cons, all the cons.
Yes,
we're
cons.
We're very fond of the cons.
Yes, there's no cons.
Very, very fond.
Listen, you must listen to the World Health Organization.
They're always right.
They're
about
always
everything.
Everything.
Yeah.
100%.
So, Phelim, tell us more about what else is happening.
Well, we have a great exclusive story. Exclusive. The rules are different for Democrats. I suppose that's not that exclusive.
Yes.
The rules are different for Democrats. You'll not believe what a bunch of Obama staff brats. And that's the only way that, these people who think they're in the West Wing you'll not believe what they called Democratic Arizona Senator Kyrsten Sinema and how they thought it was so funny. They're so witty. Okay.
And also quite recently over the weekend, you'll notice that Arnold Schwarzenegger, the Terminator, was involved in a car crash. And we noticed something peculiar about this climate catastrophe alarmist. We'll bring that to you.
I'll tell you, we leave LA and the whole country goes to hell. The whole place goes to hell.
Yes.
And as Russia plans to invade Ukraine and China is continuing its world domination and eating everybody else's lunch, we look at how diplomats and staff, who are supposed to, tell us what's going on, are, to use a phrase, a bunch of girly men. Do you see what I did there?
No, but go on.
Bunch of girly men.
Bunch of girly men.
Wasn't it Arnold Schwarzenegger who called his political opponents a bunch of girly men?
Oh, very nice, very, very clever segue. And as our hometown, Los Angeles, descends into complete chaos and further criminality and squalor, we talked to the former Los Angeles DA, Steve Cooley,
about what's going on and how to stop it. And kind of related to all this is, you'll be happy to know there are no more criminal gangs in California. They've been abolished. Criminal gangs have been abolished, according to Governor Newsom. And
we don't have a recipe this week, but we have a kind of a challenge. We have a culinary challenge.
What do we call it? A culinary conundrum.
A culinary conundrum, yes, that was thrown at us when we got to Ireland. So we're going to ask you to solve this culinary conundrum. But I think you'll enjoy that. So hang in till the end to get that. So Phelim, tell us first of all, you discovered this story the other day, and I think no one in the mainstream media has picked up on this. No one anywhere
of course they wouldn't.
has picked up on this.
But what do you hear? Okay, let's just hear. So this is Pod Save America, which is a very, 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 very successful podcast.
And who presents Pod Save America? These are randomers film. Because these could be just randomers saying something.
These are wonderful people. These are former Obama speechwriters, former deputy chiefs of staff of Obama.
This is the West Wing then.
Yeah,
this is the Obama West
and
Wing.
these are Michelle Obama's people. When they go low, we go high. Right? That's the kind of people these are. So it's Jon Favreau, Dan Pfeiffer, and they had on as a guest Alyssa Mastromonaco.
Alyssa Mende Mastromonaco.
Yeah. So
who is she, Philip?
She is also a former Obama staffer and a kind of comedian, and she had quite the job. She was president of global communications and strategy at the A&E Networks, chief operating officer at Vice Media. So these are. They came out of the Obama White House, that paragon of unity and righteousness,
peace, love,
and they go low, we go higher. And let's hear how. So they were recording this podcast as Kyrsten Sinema was saying, "I am not in favor of abolishing the filibuster, and I'm not in favor of that voter suppression act in a country where there's no voter suppression, and in fact." Minority participation in an election gets higher and higher and higher every election.
And I think the context, we're going to listen to this tape in a moment, but I think the context for this is very interesting as well, because the context is that they're commenting on an article in the Washington Post that describes the actions of Kyrsten Sinema as potentially
let's just hear
let's
hear the whole shebang.
Okay, here we go.
You guys, I have real issues with her. They're manyfold. I believe, Elijah, you tried to stump me, but I did check out CNN before I got on here. And I think in her speech, she talks about the disease of division. Also, you guys, she gave the speech as Joe Biden was on her way up to the Hill. So anyway, it's the grossest, most disrespectful thing she could have done. I think she's a That's what I have to say.
Wow.
They said they set up this Pod Save America podcast and their company, Crooked Media, because of the vulgarity of the Donald Trump presidency. This is... by the way, that's one of the most... Pod Save America is one of the most popular political podcasts in America. It's listened to by because everyone wants to hear what the Obama brats, the Obama bros, the real bros, right? What they think about everything. Everyone wants to hear that.
So calling a woman,
But I just say, so all the political journalists are listening to it. All the staffers. There's lots of media people listening to it, and not one of them thought that was worthy of a news item. That former Obama staffer Alyssa Mastromonaco called a Democrat female senator the C word, calls her an a-hole and calls her trash. And Jon Favreau and Dan Pfeiffer, Obama's best friends. In fact,
don't object and say this is we don't accept speaking about a woman this way.
Obama called Jon Favreau his mind reader. Right? Pfeiffer wrote a book called On Trumping America, a plan to make America a democracy again. And then he also wrote, Yes, we still can. Politics in the age of Obama, Twitter, and Trump. These are the good guys, and not one.
The two men who listened to this woman use this very, very vulgar language in relation to another woman.
Sexist language.
By the way, actually one of their own. A Democrat who basically is following her conscience and doing what she thinks is right.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it took her. It was probably very painstaking for her and heartbreaking for her to do that and to break with her colleagues. But this is the way it's spoken about. Yes. So if you go against this, these elites, this is how they'll treat you. This is how they treat one of their own. By the way.
And isn't Kyrsten Sinema, isn't she bisexual or gay or something like that?
I don't know.
So can you imagine if Ted Cruz did that?
Oh God! But if anybody did that,
but
it's really interesting.
Or Tucker Carlson,
and we're living in this kind of Me Too age, and this thing all about not being abusive in the workplace, and all of these
bullying. What about bullying?
Bullying. Bullying a woman.
Yes.
It's really horrible.
Yeah, but they have different. They don't
different standards for them.
So the anti-bullying. I bet you in a year's time they'll be running an anti-bullying campaign, as part of some kind of charity outreach. So, the anti-bulliers, believe me, the people who are in charge of the anti-bullying campaigns are the biggest bullies on the planet.
Out there.
Yeah.
So we're moving on
Yes.
to, over the weekend, you might have noticed that Arnold Schwarzenegger was involved in a car crash. It looks, for now, by the way, hopefully that there's no fatalities. But what we just noticed a little detail, just a small little detail we just wanted to bring to conscious level. So Arnold Schwarzenegger, as you will all know, is a climate catastrophe alarmist. And very proudly so.
Very
And
proud.
he-
It's
very proud.
his
The whole
biggest
world-
achievement of
absolutely,
his, of
the
his
whole world
governorship.
is about to come to an end because of people, far too much CO2 in the atmosphere and all that kind of thing. So we just happened to notice the car that he's driving in this car crash, which, by the way, if you see these photographs, quite extraordinary photographs. These are taken from the Daily Mail.
Yes.
Really, really extraordinary.
Can I just say something?
His car, I'm just going to mention the car type that he has is a GMC Yukon. And just to mention, this is all I wanted to bring to a conscious level. It does 14 miles to the gallon in town traffic, which basically everywhere in LA is town traffic.
Yes.
It does. By the way, when you manage to get on the highway, it does 23 miles to the gallon. And this is a guy who is going to tell you how to live. This is a guy who wants to tell you that you need to get rid of whatever. But he is driving. This is like literally the biggest possible SUV.
Gas guzzler.
I think it's the biggest one you can get.
And as they would say, the biggest polluter, the biggest gas guzzler. Can I just say those two things? Those 14 miles and 23 miles. Those are the manufacturer's numbers, right? And the manufacturer's numbers are always on the bright side because
they really
they're
want.
measured in a nice laboratory with a nice smooth road.
Yeah.
You're not braking all the time. In the real world, it's less than 14 miles a gallon in town.
Anyway,
and the second thing is he caused the accident apparently. Just saying.
Yes,
Just saying.
yes, on
So-
Sunset Avenue. So, Phelim, tell us about Havana Syndrome.
Havana Syndrome. Yeah, so you may remember lots of actually funny and interesting. I never thought it started during Trump, right? So lots of bureaucrats, diplomats, and State Department bureaucrats in these places all across the world started saying, "Oh my God, I've got headaches. Oh my God, I feel nauseous. Oh my God, I've heard a noise. Oh my God," and they were coming down with mass sickness. And it was called the Havana Syndrome because they first noticed it in Cuba. And it was a mysterious illness that affected U.S. diplomats around the globe. And the speculation was that the Chinese or the Russians had come up with some sound-based, audio-based weapon that was making U.S. diplomats sick. So I have to say, we have some experience of U.S. diplomats abroad. And we know because we have lived in places like Romania, we've been in Bulgaria, we've traveled, we've met diplomats professionally in places like, I remember in Vietnam. Cambodia.
Yeah.
And some of them are wonderfully hard-working, industrious people. Most of them are a bunch of whinging, whining, girly men.
Girly men.
Yes. And, you can imagine how much of whinging, whining, girly men they were under Trump. And I always thought, they were always complaining. Even, let's be honest, we were in Romania in the early 2000s for 7 years. And, it's great. People say, oh, my God, that must be... It was wonderful. It was a ball. It was a laugh. It was cheap. It had, there was frustrations with living in a slightly underdeveloped country. But they were vastly outraised by the lifestyle we had, the fun, the joy of seeing a developing country, the ability to see different cultures. It was just fun, and it was nice restaurants. The shops were a bit, but everything was improving. We could see it every day. But boy, the biggest bunch of whingers and whiners were the people in the American embassy. They really were. And, I remember I wrote an article about the American ambassador. He was in favor of introducing something that was a cesspit of corruption in Romania. He took this big stand against corruption in Romania, and then he got a lot of political pressure to introduce something, and he wanted to introduce it, and I pointed out that's your own USAID said this is a cesspit of corruption. Do not do this, and he went ahead and supported it anyway. And I drew attention to that contradiction in terms. Oh boy, they
didn't like it.
It was like they went to hissy fit. Remember when we went to a restaurant and this woman who I met once a week for years, I cannot speak to you. You have accused my ambassador of corruption. And I'm going, I have not accused her, but I actually just said, look, I accused him of being a hypocrite, which is a different thing. So anyway, I was always suspicious of the Havana Syndrome, and now the CIA have investigated, and they were going, yeah, it doesn't exist. It's all in their bloody mind. And they're not quite as brutal as I am. And here it is. I think it's the New York Times. The interim findings of a CIA investigation, no, it's the Guardian, have found that the majority of cases could probably be attributed to a pre-existing medical condition or environmental factors or stress, right?
Or whinging, or being a girly man. I think they didn't mention that.
I think those are all. I mean, these are the people who we're depending upon to tell us whether Putin's going to invade, to tell us about China stealing our intellectual property. God help us all. God help us all. Of course, the groups and the ambassadors and all these people who say they're suffering from it, this is not good enough. But look, it's fun. It's very interesting. The more intelligent you are, the more likely you see the more simple explanation. And I suppose this mass hysteria, right? And it's a social contagion, and it's a bit like, by the way, it's a bit like the transgender thing. That, to me, that's a social contagion among teenagers, right? Mm-hmm. Everyone thinks it's cool, and now we got this social contagion among these super educated adults, and boy, are they pissed off that they can't. That they're being told it's all in their mind. So, Havana Syndrome support group said in a statement, it's a breach of faith and an undermining of the intent of Congress, and so your foreign policy is not in good hands. Be very scared.
Well, I think people are very scared about all of these institutions that have suddenly turned or seem to have become so corrupt and so political and very ineffectual.
Talking of ineffectual and corrupt organizations, we're going to talk now about the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office. And who better to talk about it than the previous Los Angeles District Attorney, Steve Cooley. He was the last Republican to be the Los Angeles District Attorney. And now we have Mr. Gascon, who basically doesn't want to put people in prison and doesn't want to prosecute people and wants to prosecute people at the minimum level. And we're witnessing a massive spike in crime in LA, both at a petty level from the homeless and at a serious violent level. There are robberies on Wilshire Boulevard. Now, we want to say we did record this interview before the very tragic death of Brianna Cooper, for the girl from Pacific Palisades, who friends of ours knew very well. We did record this before, so that's why Steve won't be talking about that. But actually, this interview is the perfect warning. Maybe you don't know, Brianna Cooper, she was a young 24-year-old UCLA grad working in a furniture and interior design store in Wilshire Boulevard, and a gentleman came in and stabbed her to death in a random attack. This beautiful young lady with
the last text she sent to her friend basically said, there's a guy in the shop that I don't feel, I think he's a bit dodgy.
Yeah, and he murdered her, and the guy was out on bail several times. He was arrested, and he had broken his bond, I think, in North Carolina. They didn't send him back.
Our friends are saying, we're going next week, we'll be back in Los Angeles, but our friends are saying that they think this may well be, Brianna's death may actually be a tipping point for Los Angeles, but there's been plenty of those.
So we want to say we recorded this interview before that murder, so Steve Cooley and ourselves won't mention that murder, and that's not because Steve Cooley didn't care or anything like that. But actually, the interview is this interview is a warning that this is going to happen, and then let's hear the interview. So, Steve Cooley was the last Republican district attorney of Los Angeles County. He was elected for 3 terms, I think is the only DA to serve 3 terms since maybe the 1940s. Perhaps most importantly, when his term of office ended, we saw the lowest crime rates in modern times.
During his time.
Yeah, and that is why we're interviewing Steve today, because now, like a lot of cities run by progressive DAs, crime in LA is on the rise. We're here to talk to him about that. He's leading the recall effort against LA's progressive DA, George Gascon. Steve, welcome to the Ann and Phelim Scoop.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I just wanted to tell you in advance, we're, as many of our listeners will know, we're based in LA.
God help us.
This we know a lot about this topic personally.
Yes, we live in Venice, California, so we know quite a bit about it. So first of all, how low was crime during your tenure? And how bad is it now?
And what? Sorry, how low was crime during your tenure, and why was it low? And how bad is crime in LA County now, and why?
All right. It was the lowest in 60 years when I was the district attorney. And the reason is the determinant sentence law, which was then the law, was working very, very well from the standpoint of law enforcement arresting bad guys, seriously bad people, prosecutors doing their job, prosecuting them according to the law, judges doing their job, sentencing according to the law that the legislature had established and was otherwise in California's constitution. The system was working. The system started to deteriorate a little bit in 2011 with an assembly bill called AB 109, where Jerry Brown and the California state legislature shifted the responsibility for housing felons sentenced to state prison on non-serious, non-violent offenses to the counties. That was a problem. Then along comes Prop 47, written by George Gascon, supported by George Soros, which reduced the penalties across the board for a variety of theft offenses and reduced virtually every single hardcore drug from being a felony to a misdemeanor. Then you have Prop 57. Prop 57 was essentially Jerry Brown's idea, and it essentially was a big step towards wiping out the determined sentence law because it changed when people became eligible for parole and effectively disregarded sentencing enhancements that have been imposed by the court. So you have those three legal things happening. And then you have the ultimate coup de grace, which is we have a progressive, and that's even I don't know how that word even applies to this guy, left-wing, radical decarceration district attorney elected in Los Angeles County, namely George Gascon.
You said decarceration. What does that mean?
He didn't want people to go to prison or jail. He doesn't believe in a system that has as a component sentencing people to prison or jail, or at least in the alternative, he wants the minimal state prison sentence for violent and serious offenders. And in some cases, he wants no incarceration whatsoever for a convicted criminal defendant. It's part of a movement. He's part of it. And he's brought in people from the LA County Public Defender's Office to be his top management executives to implement that goal.
So what's it like for people living? I mean, we know this, but for our audience to hear, how bad is it in LA right now?
Well, crime is up very, very substantially. I think 87% up in terms of murders in Los Angeles County. And by the way, the county is bigger than the city of Los Angeles. The city of Los Angeles is 4.4 million people. There's 87 other cities and an unincorporated portion of the county that bring the population to 10.4 million, which makes Los Angeles County the largest county population-wise in the country, and the LA County DA's office by far the largest prosecutorial office. At any rate, the combination of George Gascon with these other George Soros inspired individuals throughout the country advancing a very consistent theory towards the criminal justice system has had a dramatic impact in Los Angeles County. Every category of crime is up. There are probably some categories of crime where the victims no longer report it because they know that nothing's going to happen. Yeah. So it's sort of a combination of things.
We can see that. We can see that in Venice. I mean, so much of the petty crime, and it's not petty, you know, so much of the theft and burglary, it just is not reported because
police don't even come. And if you do report it, they're not going to come. They're not going to come for several days.
No, there's no interest. I think, you know, there was, to my mind, there was also another legal case that has produced this jump in crime. It's the decriminalization of sleeping on the streets, of building tents on the streets.
The homeless problem.
Not decriminalization, but go ahead.
I think the homeless problem and the incredibly inept way it's been handled by the Los Angeles city officials and to a certain extent the county officials is contributing to an atmosphere of criminality or lack of respect for the law. And a lot of the crime that's occurring, the part one crime, the serious crime, is occurring in these homeless encampments. These are people who have drug problems, mental problems, and they act out and they hurt each other.
And you know, we're in a situation where you literally have city inspectors knocking on doors saying your garage is illegal, our patio out the back of our house is illegal because it's attached to the house apparently,
and we're getting bullied by the city over that, you know.
Yes,
meanwhile,
literally there is a tent city at the end of our streets, you know, with people building two-story attachments,
yes,
two-story building structures with a TV,
yes, and a car.
Well, no, but you know, on the pavement, on the sidewalk, building two-story attachments with TVs, abandoned vans, and that's perfectly legal.
I've seen those structures. I must say that they're amazing engineering feats given what they're working with. The only person that's shown any real leadership in dealing with the homeless problem is the Sheriff Villanueva. I think you take the best politicians, stack them up, and they wouldn't come near to accomplishing what Sheriff Villanueva has done. He has been very forceful. Everything he's doing is according to the law. He is working with others to come up with appropriate alternatives, but he's saying the public space does not belong to you.
Yes.
So get out of here. Oh yeah, in your van too. If it's causing a problem, it's got to go too. You can't do that. He has started a program which he can never solve the whole homeless problem with his program. He hasn't got enough resources. But you know what he's doing? He's showing the leadership.
Yes.
So that others do it.
Just to give people a background, last 4th of July, Sheriff Villanueva, who is I think the county sheriff, he said, "I'm going to go on." Venice Beach had hundreds, it had perhaps thousands of people living on tents. Now, people may think Venice Beach is this crazy place. We have been in the Venice area for maybe 12 years. For 6 of those years, there was a few homeless and a few bits of craziness, but it was not hundreds and it was not the thousands that exist at the moment. And Sheriff Villanueva said, "This is unacceptable. This is intolerable. On the 4th of July, I'm going to go there and I'm going to clear these people." Suddenly, confronted with that, Mike Bonin, the councillor, the mayor, all these people suddenly discovered that they had the power to move these people on. They had the ability to move these people on. But they just did not want. It's like policy. They want these people there so that there's a problem to solve. When they were going to be embarrassed, they suddenly found the motivation and the resources to do this. So this is solvable. It's just progressive. This is part of the progressive plan to keep large-scale homelessness there, because that's the way, that is the ideology that they have, decriminalizing crime.
Well, I think you're right. And, think about it. Los Angeles City and County are among the most economically successful and literally rich areas in the United States of America, and therefore the world. And they've got one of the very worst, if not the worst, homeless problem. So there's a disconnect there. They are rich, they're wealthy, they have high taxes, the highest in the country, and they seem to be the greatest failure at addressing this problem. And I think it's a matter of philosophy and lack of prioritization on their part. The voters gave the county and the city $3 billion several years ago, and nothing has improved whatsoever. It's only gotten worse, very much worse.
Well,
you're bringing up the voters, and I'm curious. Do you think you're going to be successful in recalling Gascon?
If George Gascon is placed on a recall ballot, and we hope to do that in the November 2022 election cycle, he will be recalled, and it won't even be close. He'll be slaughtered. I've seen the polling before some very recent serious incidents that caused more criticism of him. The murder in Beverly Hills and some of the smash and grab robberies and other instances that have been well recorded. Even before that happened, according to a legitimate poll taken by a highly recognized pollster, he was going to lose 70-30. 70%
Yeah,
Wow.
funny.
vote for
70-30.
recall. Yeah, he'd be slaughtered. But
Funny, we
have
haven't even
on the
talked about this. We haven't even talked about the smash and grab robberies, the follow home robberies that have seemed to have escalated in LA. So what people may not know is that on Wilshire Boulevard, which is a big shopping street where there's outdoor restaurants, and of course everyone's eating outdoor now is because of the pandemic. They're coming along in broad daylight with guns, criminals, and holding people up at gunpoint. They're following people home with and robbing them as they go into their house. They're kidnapping people's dogs. You remember, was it Lady Gaga's dogs were kidnapped? I mean, that was obviously very high profile, but that is one of many cases. And then they're also robbing people's catalytic converters at an epidemic rate everywhere around us. If you have a Prius, the catalytic converter will be stolen, and that's thousands of dollars to repair the damage and replace it. And this is an epidemic of crime, not just on top of the petty crime. And I use that word advisedly, not petty crime, but the theft and quality of life crimes from the homeless. So and you say these polls were done before this recent spike in violent crime?
Yes. Well, it was done before the high-profile murder of Michelle LaVaughn in Beverly Hills, who was shot with an AK-47 in her own home in Beverly Hills. It was done before the smash and grab robberies that started up in Contra Costa County and then spread throughout the country, took center stage. And I think those incidents and other incidents have raised the consciousness of the public at large in terms of what they're up against, and the fact that Gascon is a person who is contributing to that with his charging policies and sentencing policies and his philosophy towards decarceration.
So can I ask a question? What's the mechanism for the recall? How many signatures do you need and where do you need them
Yeah,
by?
because I was going to ask, what can people do to help with this recall effort?
Okay, here's how it works. Once an individual is served with a notice of petition to recall, that person has 7 days to file a rebuttal, 200 words or less. That package of the notice and the rebuttal is delivered to the registrar recorder, who then reviews it very, very carefully in terms of content, font size, and allows the printing of a particular authorized petition that can be distributed over the internet or in person. One over the internet is 8.5 by 11. The one in person is 8.5 by 17 with more signature spaces. Once the registrar recorder approves that petition, there's 160 days for the proponents to gather 10% of the county's registered voters. There's 5.8 million registered voters in Los Angeles County. 580,000 valid signatures must be gathered.
That's a lot.
And most people say she had at least 650,000. If you do that, then the registrar recorder goes to the Board of Supervisors, who must select a date for the election. And it can be a special election, or they can tie it to a primary or general election. Given the timing of the current effort, it'll in all likelihood be coincide with the general election in November 2022. That's sort of how it works.
Yeah. And what could a new DA do? I mean, let's imagine the recall election is successful. Will it make any difference? Let's say, a law and order DA comes in.
What would they do? What would they do to make things different?
Yeah.
Well, in general, they would rescind almost every one of Gascon's policies. And that can be done very simply. If you're elected, the moment he's recalled, he loses power. The moment someone else is selected to be the district attorney, that person has the power. That person can exercise the same power to get rid of Gascon's stuff that Gascon used to get it in there. First, you fire all the public defender, left-wing, radical, anti-police officer, decarceration people that Gascon has put in his administration to execute George Soros's program. You get rid of them and you issue a directive all of his policies, directives are hereby rescinded. You shall not follow those at all anymore. The previous policies that were in effect as of the date he was sworn in are reinstated. You shall follow those. Those policies are written down. It's called the Legal Policies Manual, and it's the Bible for prosecutors in terms of how to do their job, and their policies that are designed to work within the criminal justice system's laws and constitution. So it's actually not that complicated. If you have the right people, get rid of the wrong people, and just sort of say, we're back in business as a real prosecutorial office. We're no longer going to be sitting here advancing George Soros's ideology and having it exist in Los Angeles County. It's quite frankly, it's simple if you get the right person in there.
Some of these laws, though, have been voted on by the public. Is that not right? Some of these ordinances have they not been voted for?
The theft one.
The theft one, for example.
Well, Prop 47 was voted on by the public. They were deceived. You can blame that one on Kamala Harris. She was the Attorney General, and she put a phony, misleading title on it. Here you have a ballot proposition changing and reducing various theft offenses, minimizing them, increasing the amount of money that has to be stolen before it's even a felony. Plus, you have the reduction from felony to misdemeanor of all the possession of hardcore drugs. She puts a title on it, Safer Communities Initiative. She misled the public. The public was not smart enough to realize that they were being deceived by this Attorney General. And she's the kind of person that will do that. She's done it in other initiatives. Functionally, it was intellectual dishonesty, maybe even corruption. But that's the reason we have Prop 47. Probably the reason we have Prop 57 too. Becerra, I think, was the one that titled that one. It's basically the public is being misled and deceived. But putting aside changing those laws, which could happen, there's a movement to change Prop 47. It is more important for the DA's office to just follow the law as it exists, uphold their oath, and get rid of all of Gascon's misguided left-wing policies. That's the first and biggest step. The law will take care of itself. People will wake up. Legislature, I don't think, can wake up or not. That might be impossible. But get rid of Gascon's policies. That's the immediate solution.
And are you interested in taking on the role of district attorney? Will you be putting yourself forward, or what's the plan there?
Many times, and my answer is very simple. I'll evaluate the situation at the time. Right now, every effort, every ounce of my energy and other people's energy in terms of who's going to be the next DA should be dedicated to one thing and one thing only: gathering enough signatures to put them on the ballot to get them recalled. The rest of it will take care of itself. There'll be a campaign. There'll be lots of opportunities, lots of choices.
One of the other questions I wanted to ask, and I think you mentioned law enforcement earlier. What's the mood among law enforcement officers after the BLM defund the police movement became so popular? How are they coping with all of this?
The DAs with their no bail policy as well, that must have an awful effect on
law enforcement.
Well, I can't think of any policy that George Gascon has implemented and ordered that has not denigrated the criminal justice system one way or another. It could be no bail. It could be lack of enhancements. It could be not pursuing the death penalty in various cases. It could be a number of other things that he has done as a matter of policy that have demoralized law enforcement, demoralized the professional prosecutors in that office, and demoralized others who care about a criminal justice system that works. Hopefully that demoralization will seep down to the public at large, who will rise up and say, Gascon's a huge problem in contributing to this era of lawlessness. Let's get rid of him. Time for a change. So the demoralization, I think, is beyond law enforcement, beyond prosecutors. It's affecting society in general. General
public.
Yeah. I just, I suppose that people who don't live in LA and don't live in one of the big American cities now run by progressive DAs, I suppose it's hard for them to understand. Certainly when we moved to LA first, which is around 2009, 2010, crime wasn't an issue.
No, I don't remember that.
There was no talk about crime. We lived down in Venice, Marina del Rey, Venice. It just wasn't, it wasn't a worry. It wasn't a topic of conversation. You could walk anywhere. Now, if you want to go for a walk on the beach, I have to drive on to the beach because there's no safe way to walk to the beach now.
Yeah.
You have to walk past a homeless encampment of one kind or another, and there's a constant stress. You're always looking over your shoulder. That is new. That is not some, Venice hang up or characteristic of Venice. It is new. That came about because of these policies and because of the toleration of huge homeless encampments.
I think it's partly the homeless, partly very much as part of the emboldening of the criminal element by people like Gascon. These criminals, they know that hardly anything's going to happen to them, or at least the minimum amount will happen to them in terms of punishment for certain crimes. They know that nothing will happen to juveniles at all, so they can recruit juveniles to their gang to go out and commit certain offenses. They know that maybe now is the time to move out of where they've historically committed their crimes out to the suburbs, out to Beverly Hills and other places in Los Angeles County, and do their smash and grabs and follow home robberies. And so it's a phenomenon that's really taken off just the last several months.
Yes.
Yeah. I think we've noticed. I think we've definitely noticed.
We didn't even get talking about the mob attacks on shopping centers, which would have been unthinkable 10 years ago. It would have been unthinkable that 30 people could go into a shopping center
and just walk out
and loot and walk out. They would assume that they would get caught and get heavily punished.
It's almost like we're watching civilization or civilized society deteriorate from our very eyes. And the question is, are we going to fight back and stop it? Are we going to come up with techniques to arrest those individuals? And there are techniques that are not being employed at the present time. Is the prosecutor going to really prosecute aggressively, using every tool at his or her disposal to punish these individuals? If the prosecutors do their job, I am convinced the judges will do their job. Right now, the weak link is the LA County DA's office.
Yeah.
Hopefully that's going to change.
Yeah, hopefully. Well, Steve, thank you very much for your interview, for being on the show. It's unfortunately it's a fascinating subject. So when do you think the 160 days will start? The clock will start ticking.
I think it could start this week. Probably no later than next week. The registrar recorder has the exclusive authority to determine the petition and its contents, right down to the font size of the letters and things of that nature. They're very careful. They're very thorough. They've had it now for a couple of weeks. I think it'll be this week or next week. And as soon as that is done, those petitions will become available online. They'll be widely distributed in terms of their physical form to the historic volunteer group, and it will be put in the hands of paid professional signature gatherers. It'll take those two elements coming together to achieve the goal of getting 580,000 valid signatures. It can be done. It's not easy, but it can be done. And we have a perfect candidate that should be recalled, and people want him recalled. It's really a matter of getting the petition.
Yes.
The public.
Yes. Yeah. It's
a perfect candidate.
He's the perfect candidate. Yeah. That's
perfect
right.
candidate.
If ever there was one, it's unbelievable. Did Steve, just wondering if did Sophia mention that we sometimes ask all our guests 2 questions at the end of an interview, which if you don't have time, that's fine, but if you do, we'd be very interested. And one is, is there a piece of art or a movie, a play, a piece of music that's important to you and
that inspires you?
And
why?
Or it could be a movie, it could be a
poem,
could be anything in the art world. And the second thing was, do you cook? And if you cook, what are you famous for?
Well, in terms of literature, Atlas Shrugged is my favorite book. Very inspirational.
Yes.
In terms of art, I think the sculptures of the presidents and the monuments in Washington, D.C. are very, very inspiring, especially Lincoln. In terms of cooking, I can't say I'm a real gourmet. My wife is. She's a great cook. In terms of my specialty, probably smash burgers.
What's a smash?
Smash burgers.
What's a smash?
Hang on.
Yeah, you have to get a lot of fat content in the hamburger meat. You can't make it too lean. You need fat in the hamburger meat, and you cook it out.
We're very big believers in fat here, by the way. Just yeah, very, very important to us. So we've come to the end of this interview, Steve. We're really, really grateful for your time. We are going to be following very closely on how this recall happens, and it'll be very interesting to see what happens, because obviously something needs to happen, something needs to change. It's very, very strange, very awful living in LA now, and people are leaving. People are leaving in droves.
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
But I think people can monitor the recall campaign's progress by going to the website, recall District Attorney George Gascon.com, and that will keep them up to date, and articles will be posted, updates will occur. So that is what the campaign, one of the ways the campaign is going to be communicating with the interested public at large.
All right, Steve, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
All the best.
See you back in LA.
Okay, bye-bye. Bye.
That was great.
Yes, well, it's a warning, and it's coming through every day, and we can see it. So what else, Anne? Oh yeah, talking of which,
Gavin Newsom, this is an extraordinary story. You might have seen the story about the fact that at the freight trains coming into Los Angeles, leaving Los Angeles, are being robbed.
Left, right, and
centre. I mean, look at these pictures. Look at these extraordinary pictures.
Those are all Amazon packages, UPS packages.
So these groups are coming along, and but anyway, I'm hesitating over the use of the word. What word to use for the people who are thieving here?
Let's just read.
Because here's what happened with Gavin Newsom. Gavin Newsom apologizes for finally telling the truth about crime. The California governor, and I'm taking this from the Daily Mail, who are so reliable about these kind of things. California governor walks back calling train thieves organized gangs. He walks back that description. He
in his speech, he called them organized gangs.
Organized gangs, and he says thousands of packages are being pillaged. And he says instead of organized crime, gangs, what he should have said was groups of folks. It makes me think of folk singers.
Hold on. So he's in the same speech. He said he said organized gangs. Then he caught himself in the speech. He says, "No, I'm sorry. I should have said they're being pillaged by groups of folks."
Forgive me for saying gangs. That's not a pejorative. They're organized groups of folks that move from site to site.
Called roving gangs.
Roving gangs, yeah.
Yes.
Extraordinary, yeah. And particularly given the context of all of the awful stuff that's happening in California.
Yeah, talking of which, I just caught my eye. You may have seen the story about the lady who was thrown in front of the subway. I think we talked about her last week. We talked about her last week. She was pushed in front of a train in Times Square.
A Deloitte executive.
By as they say, a crazed vagrant. But, someone who, he murdered this woman. And she worked for Deloitte. And of course, all these companies are so woke now. And Deloitte last year gave $50,000 to an organization who's called the Urban Justice Center, and their whole impetus was, and the campaign that was contributed. Deloitte gave $50,000 basically to help this group ensure that vagrants were not moved on in subways, that they were allowed to stay. Because previous to this, what would happen was you would be moved on. If you weren't allowed to stay more than an hour at any of these subway stations, you'd be moved on. Unless you were travellers. So you were it was loitering, you were moved on. This was seen to be discriminatory, and now people are allowed to stay all day. Yeah. So you got crazy people getting crazier and crazier with all the crowds and all the noise, and the ultimate nightmare of every New York City traveller has happened. So basically, someone has been pushed in front of a train tracks and murdered.
And by someone who was loitering and was there for the day.
Deloitte helped fund the murder of their own employee by being woke.
It's just a horrible story. Yeah, the not-for-profit that they give the money to sued the MTA for codes enacted in 2020 that it argued excluded the homeless from the transit system. Just as you say, their own company contributed to this. We're coming to the end of the show, and we have this one dilemma. So you'll see the footage here of Phelim and I with these lobsters.
We were giving them as a gift.
We were giving them as a gift. They are cooked and they are frozen and they're in the freezer now. We just took them out for a moment there to show you, and we're putting them back in now.
What do we do
And the
with them?
question is, what do we do with them? What do we do with them? Can you please send your recipe ideas for what to do with these cooked frozen lobsters? And also, we don't want to die. You know, that's another point. I always have that fear with seafood. You've got to be very careful.
But it's
Now,
cooked.
the fact that it's cooked, obviously, that's a very good thing. But yeah, we'd be very interested in hearing your thoughts on what we should do with these.
Yeah, death's not an option.
And death is not an option. And as I said, next week we will be coming to you from Los Angeles. We are near the end of the project that we've been working on, the secret project that we will be telling you about soon.
Mice and Hunter is moving along. We've had some very interesting news. We're going to be looking at cuts of Mice and Hunter this week. And seeing, what.
You are going to love it. And
Yes.
we are so grateful to you for all that you have done to make this possible. As we said in the last show, we have this stretch goal of $250,000 to make sure the whole world sees it. So please give what you can and give often to unreportedstorysociety.com or mysunhunter.com. mysunhunter.com or unreportedstorysociety.com.
Thank you. And the next time we see you, we'll be back in Los Angeles.
And the
won't
next time we see you will be February.
And there'll be no criminal gangs anymore. That's amazing. We leave LA and criminal gangs just
Suddenly,
disappear.
criminal gangs. Yeah, Gavin Newsom. What a guy.
What a guy.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.